I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, and today I want to share something that could make a real difference in your life. After 40 years of treating patients in the hospital, I learned that the body is constantly trying to communicate with us. It sends signals, sometimes subtle, sometimes urgent, but always meaningful. And one of the most overlooked signals in medicine, one that I wish I had paid more attention to earlier in my career, is the quiet connection between what we hear and how we remember. Now, before we dive in, I want to be clear about something important. While I'm a physician sharing evidence-based information, this video is for educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for personalized medical advice from your own doctor who knows your specific health history. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health regimen. That said, let's get into what could be one of the most important conversations you have about your brain health this year. I want to start with a statistic that stopped me in my tracks when I first encountered it. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University followed older adults for nearly 12 years and discovered something remarkable. Those with severe hearing loss had a nearly 5 times higher risk of developing dementia compared to those with normal hearing. 5 times. That's not a small increase. That's a fundamental shift in risk that most people have never heard about. And here's what makes this so urgent. According to the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, about 1 in 3 adults between the ages of 65 and 74 experiences some degree of hearing loss. By age 75, that number climbs to roughly half. Yet most people treat hearing changes as a simple nuisance, something to live with, rather than what it actually is, a brain health issue that deserves immediate attention. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 key insights that connect your ears to your memory in ways you might never have considered. We'll start with why this matters so much, move into the science behind what's happening in your brain, and then I'll teach you a practical 1-minute technique that you can use daily to support both your hearing pathway and your cognitive function. So stay with me through all 5 points, because the last one might just be the most important thing you learn this year about protecting your independence. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Margaret. Now, Margaret is like many of the patients I've seen over the years. She was 73, a retired school administrator, and she came to see me because she was worried about her memory. She told me she was forgetting conversations, losing track of what people said to her, and feeling exhausted after any kind of social gathering. Margaret told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Dr. Harrison, I feel like I'm losing myself. I can still follow what people are saying, but by the time I get home, it's like the whole conversation never happened." That fear of disappearing, of becoming someone who can't participate fully in life, I hear it almost every day. And the truth was, Margaret had reason to be concerned, but not for the reasons she thought. When we looked more carefully at what was happening, we discovered that Margaret had been experiencing gradual hearing decline for years. She didn't think of herself as having hearing problems because she could still catch most words, but her brain was working overtime to fill in the gaps, to decode the sounds, to make sense of conversations in ways that left her mentally depleted by the end of each day. Here's what we did together. And notice I say together, because this wasn't me telling Margaret what to do. It was us working as a team. First, we addressed her ear canal health to make sure there were no physical blockages affecting sound transmission. Second, we implemented a daily practice designed to support her auditory pathway and calm her nervous system. Third, we made sure she understood the connection between hearing strain and cognitive fatigue, so she could advocate for herself. Fast forward 6 months. Margaret came into my office, and the first thing she said was, "I feel like I got my mind back." She wasn't forgetting conversations anymore. Social gatherings didn't leave her exhausted. And that scared look she had in our first meeting was replaced by something that looked a lot like confidence. Now, I'm not telling you Margaret's story to promise that you'll have the exact same results. Everyone's different. But what Margaret's story shows is that understanding this connection and taking simple daily action can shift your trajectory in meaningful ways. This brings us to our first major point, and I want you to really absorb this one. The connection between hearing and memory is not coincidental. It's biological, it's documented, and it's one of the most important modifiable risk factors for cognitive decline. The Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention, one of the most respected authorities in this field, has repeatedly named hearing loss as a leading modifiable risk factor for dementia. Not because hearing loss is dementia, but because of what happens to your brain when it has to constantly strain to understand the world around you. Picture what happens in a crowded room. When your hearing starts to fade, even slightly, your brain spends enormous amounts of energy decoding words, filling in gaps, and trying to make sense of sounds that aren't quite clear. This cognitive effort, what researchers call cognitive load, steals resources from other brain functions. Your memory, your attention, your ability to process new information, All of these suffer because your brain is exhausted from the work of simply listening. Here's what makes this so insidious. Most people don't realize how hard their brain is working. They think they can hear just fine because they catch enough words to follow along. But that following along comes at a tremendous cost. And over time, that cost compounds. The Johns Hopkins research I mentioned earlier found a clear dose-response relationship. Compared to normal hearing, dementia risk was about 1.9 times higher with mild hearing loss, 3 times higher with moderate loss, and nearly 5 times higher with severe loss. Every 10 decibel drop in hearing was linked to approximately a 27% higher risk of cognitive decline. So it's not only about what you cannot hear, it's about what your brain is sacrificing to keep up with what you can hear. And that distinction changes everything about how we should approach this issue. Now here's where most people get this wrong. They assume that hearing decline is simply about volume, about sounds being quieter, but that's only part of the story. When I was still practicing at the hospital, I would see patients every week who told me their hearing was fine. They said they could hear conversations, they could watch television, they could talk on the phone, but when I asked them how they felt after those activities, a different picture emerged. They were exhausted, they needed to lie down after family dinners, they avoided phone calls because they found them draining, they stopped going to restaurants because the background noise made everything feel overwhelming. This is what I call listening fatigue, and it's far more common than most people realize. Your ears might still be catching sounds, but your brain is working at maximum capacity to make those sounds meaningful, and that chronic overwork affects everything from your mood, to your memory, to your relationships. I want you to think about this for a moment. If you spent all day doing mental math just to understand basic conversation, would you have energy left for remembering where you put your keys, for recalling what your daughter said about her weekend plans, for engaging fully in the activities that give your life meaning? Of course not. And that's exactly what's happening for millions of seniors who don't yet realize the connection between their hearing strain and their cognitive symptoms. This brings me to our second major point, and pay close attention here because this is where the hope begins. Your auditory pathway, the connection between your ears and your brain, is not a fixed system. It can be supported, strengthened, and optimized with the right approach. The ear is far more than a passive receiver of sound. It's a complex sensory organ with thousands of tiny receptors that communicate directly with your brainstem. The outer ear alone contains numerous nerve endings that influence not just hearing, but also your nervous system regulation, your stress response, and your overall sense of alertness and calm. Research published in journals including the Nature Portfolio has explored how gentle stimulation around the ear, including areas connected to the vagus nerve, can produce short-term improvements in attention and working memory in older adults. This isn't fringe science. This is peer-reviewed research suggesting that supporting your auditory pathway may have benefits beyond just hearing. And here's the practical reality. When your nervous system is calm, when your body feels safe, your brain can allocate its resources more efficiently. The strain of chronic listening fatigue triggers a stress response that compounds the cognitive burden. By calming that stress response while simultaneously supporting the hearing pathway, you create conditions where your brain can function more optimally. I had another patient, I'll call him Robert, who perfectly illustrates this principle. Robert was a 71-year-old retired engineer who came to me frustrated because his wife kept accusing him of not listening. He insisted his hearing was fine. He'd had it tested and the results were, quote, normal for his age. But when we talked more deeply, Robert admitted that conversations felt like work. He was constantly asking people to repeat themselves, not because he couldn't hear them, but because by the time his brain processed what they said, he'd lost the thread. He described it as feeling like he was always running to catch up. What I explained to Robert is that normal hearing tests measure your ability to detect sounds. They don't measure how hard your brain works to decode those sounds, and they don't capture the cumulative fatigue of that effort throughout the day. We worked together on a daily practice designed to support his auditory pathway and reduce that strain. Within a few weeks, Robert told me conversations felt different. He wasn't sure if he was hearing better or simply listening with less effort, but the result was the same. He was more present, he was less exhausted, and his wife noticed the difference. Now I want to teach you the technique I shared with both Margaret and Robert. This is a simple 1-minute daily practice that supports your auditory pathway, calms your nervous system, and creates conditions for clearer, less effortful listening. I'm going to walk you through 4 specific movements that you can do anywhere, at any time, requiring nothing but your own hands. Before I demonstrate, I want to pause here and remind you of something important. I'm not suggesting this will cure hearing loss or replace medical evaluation. What I'm sharing today may inform your approach to daily wellness, but any concerns about your hearing should be discussed with your physician or audiologist. This is about supporting your system, not replacing professional care. The first movement involves gently cupping your outer ears with your palms. Bring your hands up as if you're warming your ears on a cold day. The key here is gentleness. You're sending a message of safety to your nervous system, not trying to force any change. With your palms cupping your ears, make slow circular motions, moving the entire outer ear in small circles. Do this for about 20 seconds. What's happening here is that you're activating thousands of tiny sensory receptors that feed directly into your brainstem. This helps your brain tune sound processing and regulate alertness. Many people notice their jaw relaxes without trying. Some feel warmth or a soft widening of attention. If you feel nothing at first, that's perfectly fine. Some ears have been quiet for years, and the brain has adapted. Stay gentle, and keep the circles slow enough that you can breathe normally. The second movement builds on that foundation of calm. Take the middle portion of each ear between your thumb and fingers. Gently pull outward and slightly back, then release. It's like you're giving the ear a little space to breathe. Do about 10 slow repetitions, keeping your shoulders relaxed so the neck doesn't join any tension. What many people notice is a subtle opening sensation around the temples or a clearing feeling as if the head has more room. This isn't about stretching hard, it's about creating space and reminding the brain that the hearing pathway is still there, still capable, still worth paying attention to. I want to pause here and acknowledge something. This might feel almost too simple. You might be thinking, how can moving my outer ear affect my memory? And I understand that skepticism. In my 40 years of practice, I learned to appreciate the skeptics because they ask the right questions. Here's what the evidence suggests. When you reduce tension in and around the ear, when you improve circulation to that area, and when you signal to your nervous system that it can relax, you're creating conditions for better brain function. You're not magically fixing hearing loss. You're reducing the strain that comes with it. And that reduction in strain frees up cognitive resources for memory, attention, and the things that matter most in your daily life. Now let's continue with the third movement. Take your thumb and index finger and pinch the upper rim of your ear, sometimes called the helix. Gently pull upward and release. Do this about 10 times on each side, keeping the motion steady and soft. Think of it like waking up a sleepy muscle. Keep your breath calm throughout. Many people feel a little warmth near the temples, or a gentle easing in the jaw during this movement. That's your nervous system letting go. If you feel any tenderness, don't push through. Reduce the pressure and slow down. The goal is comfort, not force. If you experience any sharp pain, dizziness, or nausea during any of these movements, stop immediately and speak with your healthcare provider. The fourth movement often surprises people the most. Use your forefingers to gently fold your ear forward so it lies flatter against the side of your head, covering the ear opening. With your fingertips, make small circular motions as if you're creating a soft rhythmic sensation for your brain. Stay with this for about 20 to 30 seconds. Then switch directions and let the motion remain smooth and unhurried. What happens here is fascinating. You're stimulating the front and back of the outer ear simultaneously, and you're giving your brain a steady rhythm it can trust. This tends to shift the body toward a calmer state. Many people describe feeling like their mind gets quieter, like the internal noise settles. So let me summarize this 1-minute sequence so you can remember it clearly. Start with about 20 seconds of whole ear circles, slow and gentle to warm the tissue and wake up sensation. Then take 15 to 20 seconds for the outward and back pulls, steady and light, to create a sense of space around the ear and jaw. Next, spend another 15 to 20 seconds on the upper ear pinch and lift, because that top rim often holds quiet tension that makes listening feel tiring. Finally, finish with 20 to 30 seconds of the fold forward technique, soft circles that settle the nervous system and help the mind feel clearer. 1 minute, 4 movements, something you can do while waiting for your morning coffee, while sitting in your car before an appointment, while preparing for a social gathering where you want to feel your best. This brings me to our third major point, and this is something I wish more doctors discussed with their patients. The brain doesn't just passively receive sound, it actively predicts, interprets, and constructs your auditory experience. And when hearing becomes effortful, that construction process becomes exhausting. Think about it this way. Your brain is constantly making predictions about what it's going to hear next. When those predictions are accurate, processing is efficient and effortless. But when hearing fades, those predictions become less reliable. The brain has to work harder to reconcile what it expected with what it actually received. It fills in gaps, makes guesses, and sometimes gets things wrong. This is why so many people with hearing changes report that they heard what someone said but couldn't quite understand it. or they understood in the moment but couldn't remember it later. The brain spent so much energy on the hearing task that there was nothing left for the memory task. Research from multiple institutions supports this understanding. When the brain's resources are depleted by effortful listening, working memory suffers. And working memory is the gateway to long-term memory formation. If you can't hold information in working memory long enough to process it, you can't store it effectively. This is exactly what happened with another patient I'll call Thomas. Thomas was 68 when his wife noticed he was repeating himself in conversations. He'd tell her the same story twice in one evening, or ask a question she'd already answered. Thomas was terrified he was developing dementia. When we explored what was happening, we discovered that Thomas had been straining to hear for years without realizing it. He'd adapted by reading lips, by positioning himself strategically in conversations, by nodding along even when he wasn't sure what was said. His brain had been compensating for so long that he didn't even recognize the effort anymore. Thomas didn't have dementia. He had a hearing pathway under chronic strain, and when we addressed that strain, when we supported his auditory system and reduced the cognitive load of listening, his memory concerns improved significantly. His wife stopped finding repeated stories. He stopped feeling like he was losing his grip on reality. What Thomas's story illustrates is something I cannot emphasize enough. If you're experiencing memory concerns, getting your hearing thoroughly evaluated should be one of your first steps. Not just a basic screening, but a comprehensive assessment that looks at how your brain processes sound, not just whether you can detect it. Now we arrive at our fourth major point, which addresses something I see go wrong all the time. Many people wait too long to address hearing changes because they don't realize the cascade of consequences that unfolds when the auditory pathway is strained. Here's what happens. First, listening becomes effortful. Then social situations become draining. Then, to conserve energy, people start avoiding those situations. They skip the family dinner. They stop calling friends. They let the book club membership lapse. And this withdrawal has profound consequences for brain health. Social engagement is one of the most powerful protective factors against cognitive decline. When you withdraw from social connection, you're not just missing out on conversation, you're depriving your brain of the stimulation it needs to stay sharp. So hearing strain leads to cognitive fatigue, which leads to social withdrawal, which leads to further cognitive decline, which makes hearing strain even more impactful, and the cycle continues. This is the quiet chain reaction that steals independence from millions of seniors who never realize what's happening. The good news is that this cycle can be interrupted. At every link in that chain, there are interventions that can help. Supporting your auditory pathway is one of them. Staying socially engaged despite the challenge is another. Getting appropriate professional evaluation and treatment is essential. And understanding the connection so you can advocate for yourself might be the most important step of all. I think about all the patients over my 40 years who told me they were just tired, when what they really meant was they couldn't keep up anymore. They'd adapted to their hearing changes so gradually that they didn't recognize how much energy they were spending, or how much they'd lost in the process. This brings us to our fifth and final point, and I want you to really hear this one. Protecting your memory is not only about brain puzzles and cognitive exercises, it's about protecting input. It's about making it easier for your brain to understand the world without strain. It's about staying connected to the people and activities that give your life meaning. The research on this is becoming clearer every year. Multiple studies have now shown that addressing hearing loss can slow cognitive decline. Interventions that reduce listening effort free up cognitive resources for memory and attention, and simple daily practices that support the auditory pathway can contribute to overall brain wellness. Let me be clear about something. I'm not suggesting that the 1-minute technique I've shared will prevent dementia or cure hearing loss. What I am suggesting, based on my clinical experience and the emerging research, is that supporting your auditory pathway as part of your daily wellness routine is a reasonable, low-risk approach that may help reduce the cognitive burden of listening. And here's what I tell my own family members about this. Take care of your hearing. Don't accept changes as inevitable without investigation. Support your system daily with gentle, evidence-informed practices. And most importantly, don't withdraw from the life you love just because listening has become harder. Remember, the goal is not perfect hearing overnight. The goal is a brain that no longer has to fight to understand life. A brain that has resources left over for remembering, for connecting, for being fully present with the people you love. Before I let you go, I want to share one more story that I hope will stay with you. This is about a woman I'll call Eleanor. Eleanor was 79 when I first met her, and she had essentially given up. She'd stopped attending her church group because she couldn't follow the discussions. She'd stopped calling her grandchildren because phone conversations were exhausting. She told me she felt like a burden at family gatherings because people had to repeat everything. Eleanor wasn't living, she was existing, and she had accepted that this was simply what aging looked like. We worked together over several months. We addressed her hearing pathway. We implemented daily practices, like the one I've shared with you today. We helped her understand that what she was experiencing wasn't inevitable decline, but a treatable strain that could be managed. The last time I saw Eleanor, she had just returned from a week visiting her daughter across the country. She'd attended a family dinner with 14 people. She'd played games with her grandchildren. She told me, with tears in her eyes, that she felt like herself again. That's what this is about. Not just hearing better or remembering more, though those things matter. It's about maintaining your connection to the life you've built, to the people you love, to the person you know yourself to be. And remember, this information is meant to educate and empower you, not replace the advice of your personal physician. Take what you've learned today and have a conversation with your doctor about what's right for you. So let me leave you with 3 key takeaways from everything we've covered. First, the connection between hearing and memory is real, documented and modifiable. Addressing hearing strain is brain health work. Second, your auditory pathway can be supported through daily practices that reduce strain and calm the nervous system. Third, small consistent action matters more than perfect solutions. 1 minute a day is achievable, sustainable, and worthwhile. If you found this helpful, if you learned something today that you can use, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. I release new videos every week, specifically designed to help you understand your health in ways that make a real difference. And I promise to always give you the science without the hype. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you try the technique? What did you notice? I personally read every comment, and I'd love to hear from you. If you know someone who struggles with hearing changes or memory concerns, please consider sharing this video with them. You might be giving them information that changes their trajectory. In my next video, we're going to explore another overlooked connection that affects millions of seniors. It involves sleep, stress hormones, and why so many people wake up at the same time every night. If you've ever wondered why your mind races at 3 in the morning, you won't want to miss it. Until then, take care of yourself. Your brain is working hard for you every day. The least you can do is support it back. Here's to your health.